What can I do for you, young man?
Alright, Metro Last Light. This game has had more than a few issues over the past few months, but it's out now, and at the risk of completely spoiling my review, I will just say that it was worth the wait.
Like a stroll through the park, huh?
Metro Last Light is a difficult game to explain. On the most basic level, it's a little bit of everything. Half first-person shooter, half survival horror, with a gritty post-apocalyptic overlay. You might think that sounds cliche, and you'd be right. But Metro Last Light is so much more than the sum of its parts. It's not just a satisfying shooter, it's a poignant analysis of man's selfish desires for power, destruction, and in some cases, unimaginable cruelty. Plot-wise, Last Light does deviate from the literary canon. Metro 2034, the book, follows a new set of characters and conflicts, while the game picks up where the previous one left off. Moscow's underground metro tunnels are filled to the brim with destitute citizens and soldiers indoctrinated with ideologies reminiscent of Russia's violent past. Rival factions are vying for military control, and you, Artyom, are at the center of it, trying to prevent an all-out war. With tension mounting below the surface, there are even worse troubles above ground. The Dark Ones Artyom thought he had eliminated in the first game are back and not quite what they appear to be. This aspect of the storyline isn't fully fleshed out until the end of the game, which is okay, because even without context, it still provides some of the most visually unnerving and tender scenes in the whole narrative. For such an outrageous scenario, 4A has done a damn good job of crafting a believable and emotionally compelling story. It packs just enough betrayal, espionage, and sexy seduction to keep even the most hardened gamer on their toes. And it's supported by excellent scriptwriting and genuine Russian voice acting. Perhaps the most impressive thing about Last Light is the sheer amount of detail that's been put into not just the environments, but the characters and their backgrounds and personal stories. The metro stations are bursting with life and littered with death, painting a grim picture of hope in the last bastion of human civilization.
Where did they take her?
Mama's home already. We'll be with her soon.
Many of the metro stations have become glorified shanty towns populated by displaced families and petty thugs with some of the most unique costume design I've seen in a very long time. These towns are rich with opportunities for interaction, and hours can be spent just losing yourself in the lives of its people. You can shoot rats in a minigame, donate money to the homeless, help a boy find his lost teddy bear, or visit a burlesque show and stay as act after act after act performs on stage. Vendors will also set up shops in town offering ammo and weapons in exchange for bullets. In addition to a few throwable items, Artyom can carry up to 3 guns at a time, some familiar and some new. All still have the same cobbled-together feeling of a pre-war military weapon, with minor upgrades now to improve the gun's handling and efficiency. This is particularly important as the game has several on-rail segments designed to break up the monotony of ground combat. These sections are usually fun and well-placed in the campaign, but the rather obtuse enemy AI can make them a tad repetitive and predictable. This extends into the ground combat as well, which seems to have flip-flopped from the previous game. Whereas Metro 2033 was criticized for its overly sensitive AI, Last Light's enemies seem almost too forgiving. There were definite moments when I should have been spotted, which is usually indicated by a nice spike in music, but for whatever reason, I wasn't. This is not to say that the game is easy by any stretch of the imagination. 2033 was known for being difficult, and Last Light continues that tradition, just with a few more concessions. Ammo and medkits come in slightly larger supply than before, but they're still relatively scarce. Likewise, stealth takedowns aren't quite as crucial as they were in 2033, but they're still necessary to conserving bullets. The game also provides night vision goggles along with the option to shoot out lights so you can pick your enemies off in the dark, one by one. Unfortunately, a bug prevented mine from working, which nullified that entire aspect of the game for me. It wasn't unplayable by any means, but it did limit my options for stealthing. So once an enemy has spotted you, there's not a whole lot of damage you can take before you'll actually die. Again, Last Light seems to be slightly more forgiving in this regard than 2033 was, but it's still punishing enough on its own. The combat is still super satisfying and extremely tense at times, but in Metro tradition, it is still the least exciting part of the game. Last Light is clearly more focused on cultivating a rich narrative and a compelling atmosphere than it is on run-and-gun combat, which is great because those are the two things Metro does best. Last Light is filled with so many jaw-dropping moments, both beautiful and disturbing, that it's hard to not just stop and stare. Pink and purple sunsets are punctuated by big, bright moons. Even the gray skies are oppressively beautiful, bringing storms that sweep through the swamps like a Florida hurricane. It's too bad the most picturesque areas of the game are also the deadliest. The world outside is predictably rife with irradiated creatures, many of which have special mutations that make them extra tricky to kill. Because of this and the toxic radiation in the air, your time outside has to be carefully monitored. Gas masks and air filters must be worn and changed frequently, but again, the game is so generous with them this time around that it feels more like a nuisance than a tension-building device. I can only assume this and the other concessions I mentioned were implemented to widen the game's appeal, which I can't necessarily blame 4A for doing. There's still a difficulty option in the menu that you can change at any time, but truthfully, normal is challenging enough on its own. What I find upsetting is that Ranger mode, the hardcore difficulty that 4A previously said is how the game was meant to be played, was only included as a pre-order bonus or $5 DLC. Because of this, I wasn't able to evaluate that portion of the game, though I'm sure it's very hard. From a purely technical standpoint, Metro Last Light is steps ahead of its predecessor. Apart from my complaints with the night vision goggles and some rather odd sound mixing, there were maybe a handful of strange character animations in the entire 10 to 12 hour campaign. It also goes without saying, though I will anyway, that this game looks incredible on PC. The environments are rich with texture and color, and detail oozes out of every single corner. It's hard to find things that are fundamentally wrong with this game. The narrative, the pacing, the performances, the music, the visuals, it's all superbly well put together. And while it lacks the near-masochistic challenge of Metro 2033, in many other ways it surpasses it. Metro Last Light is a more accessible game and one I would recommend to anybody with an appreciation for beauty, no matter how dismal. I give it a 4 out of 5. All right, so if it wasn't obvious, I really liked Metro Last Light. I was kind of worried there for a second based on the preview build that I saw earlier this year, but I can now confidently recommend it. So this game is out on 360, PS3, and PC. I highly recommend getting it on PC if you can, because like I said, the game is absolutely gorgeous. That's it for me. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.